Welcome back, everyone, to the Awakened Reflections podcast. I am here with Hope Rose. Hope, how are you feeling today?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I am, let's see, the first feeling that comes up for me is ecstatic. So I'm following that and I'm allowing that to be the intention for this podcast. And ecstatic feels right. So, yeah, love that. Ecstatic. Thank you for asking.
Ecstatic. Yeah, that's a great word.
I like it. I don't use it often. That's just what comes up for me. So I like it. And we'll roll on with that. I am super excited to chat with you today, conversate, and I trust that you will share some um, nuggets of wisdom and love just from me observing and looking through your content, which I trust and I really love. No pressure on you. I just have that trust feeling within myself. And yeah, thank you for being on the show. And I can't wait to dive into some really cool topics with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so delighted to be here.
So, first question is something that we talked about just before we started this conversation, the name Hope Rose. How did that come about, and what is your relationship with Source?
It's a great question. Yeah, so Hope Rose is who I channel, and the name came about almost 3 years ago. I was going through a very difficult situation, which we may discuss on this podcast forthcoming. And one day, like I really distinctly remember, like where I was sitting, the weather outside, the specific date, and this name Source just like literally like just came into my consciousness, and it was like Hope Rose. And I immediately changed my name online and have been kind of channeling Hope Rose ever since. And to be honest, when that name came to me, it wasn't like you're going to channel as Hope Rose. Like Source just gave me your Hope Rose. And then the last couple of years, I was like, oh, I'm actually like channeling what Source is bringing through me. Um, it's like an angel thing. That's the quote I've been saying the last couple of weeks. It's an angel thing. And so stepping fully into Hope Rose, like this new identity, and really it's a yeah, source, spirit, soul thing, and realizing, like consciousness is giving me wisdom and words to speak to others. And so that's how I kind of channel Hope Rose. And really it's like a movement as well to alchemize our ashes into, beautiful works of art. So I'm kind of the lighthouse, the catalyst for that.
I love that. And so it's like I've been in the spirituality space for these past couple of years. That's how life guided me to this direction. And these past couple months, I've been diving deeper into channeling and things of that nature, that side of spirituality, astrology, channeling. It's been very interesting and I've learned a lot. So when you say channel, what are you? So are you channeling an angel? Are you channeling an entity? Or how would you describe more particularly like channeling? Because you say it's from source. Some people may be confused, like, oh, which source? Is that the universe? Is it God? Is it the Tao? Is it Allah? Is it the one divine intelligence? There's a lot of different words. Or is it just the same thing, just a different label?
Yeah, to me, source is a divine intelligence. Um, God, universe, I would say, not like um not some man up in the sky that's looking down on us and judging us. That's I grew up in that, and that is not who I am today. That's not who I embody today. But really, like divine essence, really the divine consciousness. Like there's other realms out there, and so how I am currently channeling, I think, as I continue to kind of step into this role, I guess, if you would say, um, and honing in on this gift. As of right now, it's just I receive very clear downloads, and I can read energy. I guess these are gifts, and if somebody's listening to this podcast, hopefully they kind of understand some of this terminology. Um, but yeah, it's really specific downloads, and I can give an example. Just a couple weeks ago, I had a download, and I took action on it immediately, and I can go into that if you would like. But just very specific downloads of like what I'm supposed to do, and it's just so clear. That's the thing I think about. Like as for me, channeling, obviously I can't speak for other people. Everybody who like channels is very different in how they, some have guides, they can hear voices. I have a little bit of that. As of right now, it's really, I get downloads. I can kind of see and feel things with other people and kind of speak to that from like the downloads I'm receiving. And the downloads are extremely clear. It is, they're pretty magical. um yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so from because I've talked to some previous channelers here on the show, and they all 100% agree that everyone is a channel. It's that we all block our accessibility to source or divine intelligence. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. Most, we're in America. I would say globally too, but just because we're in America, I'll use that example. Most of us, most of society is very asleep. They don't have consciousness. They have outsourced, and I'm using that word deliberately, they have outsourced their source to government, to ideas and beliefs that have come down through generations and lineages and um, methodologies. And so they've outsourced their source. And so that they're not connected, they're not plugged into the outlet. And if you're not plugged into that outlet, which is source, which is divine consciousness, yeah, they're asleep. They're not awake to what's happening inside them, what's happening around us. Because everything at the end of the day is energy. Our laptop is energy. This table is energy. Everything is energy, and a lot of people are really missing. They have, you know, they're not connected to that energy, that energetic source. And so that is why, yeah, everybody's a channel, everybody's a divine source. They just haven't tapped into it because they have bought into a lot of society's misbeliefs, misaligned beliefs of, you must go K through 12 and then go to college for 4 years and you get the degree and then you get the job, the white picket fence, the house, the, 2.5 kids, the lake house if you're, really doing well, if you're super successful. And then one day they wake up and they're like, I don't want to send my kids to school. Women are extremely, if the woman is taking on more of like the masculine role of, providing and just like that CEO role of business, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not energetically aligned. She's maxed out because she can still provide value. But when our feminine, speaking as a woman, when our feminine essence is kind of outsourced and we're in a very masculine driven world, we become depleted and we're not connected to source. And so there's all these beliefs that people have kind of bought into instead of asking questions. School teaches you what to learn, not how to learn. You can't ask questions. It's a top down approach. And if you look at how schools are designed, they're not exactly hospitable buildings. They resemble something else. They're institutional. So that is why people, slowly people are waking up. I think the last 4 years has been a big awakening shift with, um, I have a different word for the word COVID, but we'll use COVID for now. I think that has awakened some people to what's really going on in our country, which is really exciting to see. And I think as more people begin to awaken and plug into that source energy, then consciousness can come back online for them individually and then also collectively. And that's what's really exciting to see if we can like really shift humanity on a collective level, which is, why, this podcast exists and why so many other people are also, raising the collective consciousness. And that's a beautiful gift.
Yeah, and I like pairing, connecting dots here, and some terms that co-align with what you just talked about is the documentary, not the movie, The Matrix, or the series of the movies. It's definitely a documentary. It's not a movie. If you get it, you get it. If you're still asleep, then you just watch the movie. But it's basically what you talked about is like how I understand it is breaking free from the matrix and just really taking that red pill of society of, you can call it spiritual awakening. I guess you could say it could be like the red pill. Once you realize all your beliefs, identity, stories about yourself aren't true or as you perceive them to be, and there's a whole nother side of life. It's like you can't go back. And also you could also describe this stuff as like escaping a rat race. Like you mentioned about the whole college situation. I am 24 now, about to be 25, and I went to college for one semester, then I dropped out for many reasons. But one of the reasons I looked ahead, it's like I did fine in college, grades wise and stuff. I just looked at the future career paths. I'm like, I just know deep down that I just don't want to stick to one career for the rest of my life. I don't, something doesn't feel right about this whole, like you mentioned, the 2.5 kids, the medi- uh, low six figure income, climbing the corporate ladder, and just doing that way of living. That was the previous generation or two that stuck to that more than, I guess I'm classified as Gen Z. Um, yeah, something about just never felt right with that, and I'm glad I caught on early. Kind of wish I'd caught on earlier, but it led me to where I am now. And something. Oh, actually, let's go back to source real quick. Do you do any practices or rituals to get you into a state to where you can hear the voice? Because for me, whenever I get downloads, because I do receive downloads as well, for me, it's when I'm on walks. Doesn't matter if I'm walking with music or a podcast or I'm walking in silence or with my dog. It feels like for me, it's like a drag and drop. Like it pops in out of nowhere when I receive downloads. How do you receive downloads, and is there any rituals or practices that you do to allow yourself to receive them?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. So previously, I was a sponsored ultra endurance athlete. And so I've run multiple 50 milers and 100 milers, and, training full time really brought me so many downloads. And because I have really created and set up my life since I can remember, I'm in my mid 40s at this point. So I have just lived a very committed, devoted life to really clearing out the noise that most people live by. So I choose not to own a TV. I'm very specific in what I read, what I consume. So when I say about consume, I'm not just, it's not exclusive to just food and, beverages I drink. Like I choose not to drink alcohol because I believe that really affects source consciousness energy. It's we can go, yeah, alcohol is a whole nother topic. We can go, that's an hour long podcast in and of itself. So I really am very mindful of my choices and, like, yeah, what I'm consuming, what I'm reading, who I hang out with, who I choose not to hang out with. Like, like I'm 45. I have never partied in my entire life, just never have. And I've never done drugs. I probably have had 5 drinks my entire life. And that's years ago. It's just never been my thing. And so I think because I've structured my life in this, for me, aligned way, I am able to receive those downloads and insights quickly. Certainly, activity, exercise, whether I'm weightlifting or running or climbing or any exercise, physical activity, that definitely brings me a lot of downloads for sure. So many ideas and inspirations, and especially business ideas. Like I always joke, like I need to write a book of all my business ideas because I'm not going to have enough time to build all these businesses. And all those ideas really do come from hours of, investing myself to, my sport, my craft, my art. And so that is, yeah, my whole life is kind of centered around that. And then I guess really specific practices like, I have a very dedicated twice a day writing, journaling, you know, nightly pages, morning pages, routine where I just, free write, and a lot of stuff can kind of come through that. And yeah, I think that probably covers it, but I've created my life to really be open to source at any moment. And, eating food that's, like, that's just conscious, like conscious of how it was made, how it was grown, how it was prepared, things of that nature. And so I think all those things add up, and that's what I always kind of remind people, like all of our choices are drops in either two buckets. The bucket that you want to elevate and grow, and where the vision for your life, or it's a drop in the bucket where um things are not going as well. It's like our choices always are going to have some kind of impact on our life. Where do you want your drop to impact? Further into debt and disease and disappointment, or do you want your choices to kind of be in the bucket of consciousness and creation and caring and compassion and higher vibration, things of that nature.
Yeah, it's funny. My brain just went because you named like three D's, then you named four C's of like where you drop the buckets. I don't know why I just made that connection, but that's a good way for me to remember things. You said like disease. I think there's another one is like death and like disappointment and
De-
all of that
yeah,
stuff.
and that, like, literally, as I was saying that, like, that was channeled to me in that moment. Like,
Mm,
it was just like literally live. It was just channeled of like debt, disease, and disappointment. um and yeah, debt, disease, and disease of the soul, disease of the body.
mm-hmm.
It's not just related to like health things, but and I've heard they're at the spiritual level. This is kind of an Eastern medicine thing, but it's the soul that has like the disease. When you heal the soul, then the body heals,
Mm,
because the soul is when the soul's not in alignment, when the soul's not conscious, and it's just on autopilot and obeying instead of like creating, then the soul kind of atrophies. And that's why we have so much dis-ease, dis hyphen ease. It's dis-ease in our society, dis-ease in our emotions, dis-ease in our body. And that's then we get into the debt. And debt can also be just not financial debt, but it's debt of the soul. If you keep on, I always give this analogy too, like you're either spending or investing. And language is really important, of like really watching our words, my words. And if somebody's like, oh, I just spent time. Well, spending can have the connotation that there's no investment in it. Like, I'm investing my time in this podcast right now. I'm investing my time into exercise or eating healthy. And so people look at spending as not a return, like, on their investment. So when you switch that, when you flip out those words of like I'm investing or spending, that can really actually rewire the brain and help the person see, like, oh, how am I going to invest my time today, or am I just going to spend it without like a budget? um I think that is a good place to kind of start realigning yourself to come back to your soul, and you can heal your soul, and your soul is alive again, and it's not in debt or disease or disappointment, depression. um it feels in alignment, because when we're not in alignment, then that's when things, if you're just a point degree off, like if you're a ship, if you're point one off, you're not going to end up at the destination where you want it to go. So it can just be those minor little tweaks in your life of like, oh, let me get back on the path so I can end up at the destination that my soul is calling me to.
yeah, it's like you mentioned. It's like I understand it as like NLP practice because it's like we are programmed through society, through our friends, through our family members, through our partners to like say things a certain way. So it's like you said, invest and spend. For me, the two big aha moments or epiphanies for me was instead of saying I'm losing weight, I release weight. Because when you lose weight, when you lose something, you tend to look for them. Like I lost my car keys, I lost my wallet. You lose weight, you kind of want to look for it somewhere else. So that was like another aha moment for me. Then recently, it was a funny synchronicity. I had two podcast conversations back to back, and they both said the exact phrase from "I have to "I get to," which I've been really making intentional to put that in my uh, daily vocabulary. I get to go to the gym. I get to be alive instead of I have to, which takes away the shoulds and the shame and all of that stuff. Something that you've talked about there at the end is the term alignment. And when you speak on alignment, what are you being in alignment with? Is it your desires? Is it your dreams, your goals, or is it just like your soul's intention, your karma, your purpose? What does like alignment mean for you, and how do you get into alignment?
I think alignment is becoming really still first, of being, being okay with being still, being alone with your thoughts, being alone in, in an environment, and tapping into what you can, to what I can hear, since you're answering this question to me, of really like, okay, source, what is the vision for my life? And, when you ask those deep questions, source will usually, pretty typically, like, it comes to you. And so alignment for me is really living my soul's purpose, that I believe, source has given to me, that vision, to the best of my ability, and really alchemizing. The other thing I think alignment too is really alchemizing the tragedy, the trauma, the, really quote unquote awful things I have experienced, I have gone through, and aligning those to the outcome that I desire for the highest good of all. And alignment for me is just not for myself, it's for the collective, of like, okay, I am here on this planet, you know, how can I use the story that has been gifted to me? How do I steward it to the best of my ability? And making decisions through that lens. So alignment is very like, what lens am I looking through? Am I looking through, fear and shame and guilt and, lower vibration, emotions, trauma, patterns that I'm aware of now, patterns that, will be revealed to me when the time comes. And so alignment is just, it's kind of like a car, being aligned to, head a certain direction. And does this choice align with the vision that's been given to me? Does this, and it's not necessarily being neurotic about all the choices, but I think it's really paying attention to, is this thought really in my highest good? Is this thought in the collective's highest good? Is this action, is this choice? And so just being super mindful of where I'm getting off track and how I can kind of, come back into alignment. And it's a daily practice, because, we are living in a 3D world, and there's many things that will, attempt to, derail us. And the alignment piece is, that's like really the work of like, okay, got derailed, let's untangle that and come back, online, so to speak. And that's a very powerful daily practice.
What are some of those things that you see in your personal life or you see in others that's pretty common that derail us out of alignment? Are there any things that stand out that's like, oh, it's obviously social media, it's the internet, it's hanging out with your closest friends who don't serve you? Like, what do you see anything specific that seems to be pretty common that derails most people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most common thing is people have exchanged their soul for something that they thought would buy and bring them happiness and peace, their sovereignty. And so they have, sometimes I say like they've sold their soul. It's a catchy phrase, because it basically they have exchanged their soul in something that they were promised, and that promise was not a promise, it was a mirage, of like what I was saying earlier, of like, you know you go to college and you do this, you follow the steps, you follow the check boxes, and then it's like, oh, my college degree isn't good enough, I need my master's. Oh, I still can't get a job, I need, another master's in another area. Oh, I need my doctorate. Like, they're just chasing after the next thing. Like, oh, well, you're not happy because you don't have two master's degrees, or you're not happy because you don't have three cars. It's like whatever society and, the programming that, people are in is very when you give us this, we'll give you that back. And that's not true. Because you're exchanging your soul for something else. And that's what I really want. Like, that is one of my visions and missions, is really to help people bring, like, I'm going to reclaim my power. I'm going to reclaim my sovereignty. My soul is not for sale. End of story. My soul is not for sale. I'm not exchanging it for anything. And that's why, part of, I have a big mission, and part of it is, yes, bringing your soul back, but, being your own boss, like starting your own business, being in charge of your life. And it's okay to, work for other people, but it's I don't believe it's in the highest good of all that we exchange our autonomy for a false promise. um and that's where I think society, it's like, oh, if you go to the bar and have drinks, you'll meet, him or her, um and you'll be happy, like Friday happy hour. How many people go to Friday happy hour because they can't, they're so like, it's Friday, it's my Friday. And it's just like, they're so living for, like, they're dying for Friday night because they're so miserable with their 9 to 5 job. And that's kind of like the evidence of, where people on a, on a big scale have just, they don't have their autonomy, they don't have their sovereignty anymore. Of, even the last 4 years of, like, if you don't, follow X, then you're going to get, fired from your job. And that's coercion. Like, my body is not for sale, my soul is not for sale, like, this is me. And so when people start stepping into that power, like that internal power, I'm not talking about, like, government power, where, tyranny. I'm not talking about tyranny. I'm talking about personal power, where I stand in my truth. I don't let other people derail and dictate. There's two more D words: derail and dictate how I live my life. Um, and so I think that's, it's really detangling how people live. Right now, people are very relegated to, parents, mother gives birth and goes back to work after 4 weeks. Like, our whole, like, I mean, it could be a very long podcast, but our whole system just needs to be completely brought back, like, completely untangled. And children are, children need to be, children need to be with their parents, not raised by, daycare and outsourced. And so a lot, that kind of comes back to what I was saying, moments ago, of just, we've outsourced everything. We've outsourced our parenting, we've outsourced our food, we've outsourced, our financial obligations. And when we kind of, as a collective, when we reclaim our sovereignty in all of these different areas, then the massive shift really happens, I think. And it can happen fast if people really are like, I'm going to step up to this and, really live a life that I'm not waiting for Friday night happy hour. I'm just as excited about Monday morning as I am about Friday afternoon.
The big question that comes from me, from what you talked about, is, so this is gonna be a deep question. Is there a specific definition of happiness, or is happiness subjected to that person's interpretation of the word? Because it's like, for me personally, just to give context, it's like, I think a lot of people in society see happiness as like a duality. It's like, you only get happy once you get something, or you are something. Or no, actually, I'm saying that wrong. It's like, you get happiness is like contingent upon something else. But I see happiness and joy pretty closely intertwined. Um, from me studying like Anthony DeMello, like a year or two ago, where it's like, happiness is just like your state of being. Um, yeah, I'm just curious to see, like, what is your definition of happiness, and it's like, why should we chase? Chase seems to be like a interesting word that is coming up for me, or want to, or desire. Okay, this is interesting. A lot of things are coming up for me. Okay, let's start off simple. What is your definition of happiness, and do we need happiness? Is it suggested to have in our lifetimes? Yeah, what's just your whole overall um understanding and experience of happiness?
So our circumstances are always changing. So happiness if we base our happiness on circumstances, we will never be happy. Like if you're, if you can't be happy with $1, you're not going to be happy with 1,000,000. And somebody with, somebody who has $1, like, I would be very happy with 1,000,000. No, because happiness is fleeting because you're basing it on external things. When I have the child, when I have the relationship, when I get when I get the relationship, when I get the child, when I get, and this is what I love about Dispenza, of like being grateful. And so I like gratefulness versus happiness. It's like I am grateful for the thing, even though I don't have it in my physical reality now. I know it's already on its way to me. And so living in that state of mind, of thinking, of like I have whatever it is that I desire, living in that gratefulness now, knowing that it's on my way to me. Because I think a lot of people they are chasing happiness. And when we chase something, we're running away from something. So what are you running away? And it's usually like people want to manifest. And I learned this from some teacher some time ago. It's like people want the relationship. They don't want the relationship. They want the feeling of the relationship. Because so let's say they want the feeling of the relationship, like, oh, I'm seen by the world that I matter. Because back in their childhood, typically they felt they didn't matter. They were abandoned. They had, whatever childhood trauma, like whatever story that got stuck in their, subconscious at age, up to the age like 7. So quick put a pin there. But usually by the age of 7, all of our beliefs are like kind of pre-coded. So the first 7 years of a child's life are very crucial. And basically we have a lot of adults who are still living as, 5, 7-year-olds. And we have 5 and 7-year-olds in relationships and running businesses in our communities and driving cars and, working as a cashier, and like all these little boys and girls are running our society, running, our towns, and we haven't integrated those wounded parts of ourselves up to, our current age. So back to kind of happiness, like, people like, okay, when I get married or when I have a boyfriend, girlfriend, I'm going to be happy. Well, you might be happy for a moment in time, but that happiness is not going to last because people evolve, people change. And when you're basing happiness on another person or the job or anything external, that happiness is a rug, and that rug is going to pull out from underneath of you, and then what happens? So I really like the gratefulness aspect of like I am grateful for what I have right now, and really tapping into like that gratefulness. And I think that's more, gratefulness is more grounding in the body, in our human system, mind, body, spirit, than like happiness. Like happiness can be an adjective word of how we're feeling, but it also can like change from day to day. Of like, yeah, you might have a quote unquote bad day. You can still be happy when you're having a quote unquote bad day. You can still be grateful. And so if we only base our happiness on at the external, it's going to be a road of very, deep disappointment, lots of letdowns, because it's an expectation. When we have expectations of like, okay, I'm going to be happy when XYZ happens, it might happen, then it might go away, might leave, or whatever happens, the job might end, the relationship might end, the car got totaled, there was a car accident. Like how can I keep my gratefulness in this moment? And so I think keep coming back to like tapping into gratefulness for even just the very little things that we take for granted. Like just here in America, like we are so blessed to have well, I'll say clean water, but our water is filled with fluoride, so it's not necessarily clean. But I guess when I say clean water, I mean it's like versus like people in Africa, they don't have running water. Like there's just so many things to be grateful for. And I think when I have gone through some really tough times. I'm so grateful for like color and colored pens and like my body and my hands, my voice. Just like there's so much to be grateful for. And when we can tap into that gratefulness, that's where happiness can stem from. And then we're not constantly rocked by the ship, on a rough sea of like happiness is fleeting. Like happiness can be constant when we're grateful.
I love that. So it's more shifting towards the idea of gratitude than happiness, because depending on that person's definition of happiness, it could be fleeting, and but gratitude is a more grounded, more stable, perhaps even a more enjoyable attitude, state of being. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, because if somebody's trying, and I even recently, I this is another word frame. Like you were saying this earlier, like I have to work out to like I get to work out. I even actually been coaching people on I am grateful I can work out, because words have energy, vibration, and the word getting, it's very grabbing. It's like I have to get something, I have to extract, I have to force it, I have to cling to it, because if I don't hold on to this, it's gonna go. And so I'm even shifting, language from have, get to grateful. Like how can you switch, or become, like I don't get a relationship, I become the person I desire to be in a relationship. And so we don't get things, we become whoever we want to become. And become is just, it's kind of, healing, refining, cleaning the gunk off of, our masterpiece, our internal masterpiece. Um, and so, yeah, it's really stepping into like, I'm grateful I can do this. I am able to do this. Just because the energy of the word get is just, it's a little bit harsh, and it could be aligned in a different, more optimal way.
Yeah, language is like one of those easy things to recognize and be aware of where your subconscious program comes from. And so it's like if anyone wants any action steps from this podcast episode, is to really pay attention to what you're saying, not just to yourself but also to others, because you may find something that you may say I should a lot, or I could, or I would, or there's a lot of different phrases. If you take the time to really recognize where they come from, there may be a profound awakening or paradigm shift that can happen within you. So it's like I'm learning to go from I have to I get to become or be grateful for. So that's something I'm improving on. I can improve upon after this conversation. So thank you for that. Something that I will regret if I don't mention during this episode is, so books have helped me change my life probably more than anything or anyone over these past 5 years, because the most briefest summary of what's happened with me. So, dropped out of college due to a lot of self-diagnosed heartbreak, anxiety, depression, extreme introvertedness, plus didn't want to go down the whole rat race of the matrix route of society. That so when I dropped out of college after that first semester, I had to figure out like what am I going to do with life, and source, God, divine intelligence brought in personal development books into my life instantly. That's probably like a week afterwards, which is really interesting. And from that point in 2019 to now, that's 5 years. I've read pretty close to about 500 books, I would say, in this space of nonfiction of personal development, business, finance. But the last 3 years have been heavy on psychology, philosophy, and then spirituality. Spirituality's probably been taking like 90% of that stuff. And I saw on your Instagram highlights that you are doing the 52 book challenge, which is really exciting, a book a week on average. Um, Either from this year or from your whole entire lifetime, what would you say are the five most impactful books that you've ever read?
Oh goodness. Yeah, great question, and thank you for knowing that little tidbit about me. That's exciting. Yeah, I will say I'm not traditionally known as, like, I wouldn't classify myself as like I love books. I'm like I learn different ways. Like a book really has to interest me for me to like sit down and read it. And so I also like challenges. And this challenge came up at the end of last year, and I was like, I'm gonna do it. We're gonna read a book a week of and everything in nonfiction of spirituality, business, entrepreneurship, relationships, like anything in those categories. So yeah, I'm on week 43 right now, and yeah, plugging right along. So the first book from this year that I read that has still impacted me is Think Like a Horse. And it was a really great book. And the reason why I really enjoyed it was just because how humans and horses are so alike. In some horses, like, so it was this horse trainer in Wyoming, and he has taken some of like the horses that have been abused and brought them to his ranch and trained them to trust, to kind of like learn love, like he's the gentle master, he's not going to hurt them. These horses have come from other either bad trainers or abusive trainers, I should say, or rescues, things of that nature, and how he has trained them to become these gentle giants. And it was such an impactful book of just how you know he could see the patterns in the horses, and that's kind of how I like work with people. I can see patterns in humans as well, and how the two coincide. And I just think it's such a beautiful example of like combining nature with humanity. And there's even like horse therapy of like people that are going through different things, they can go do horse therapy, which I've not done, but it's something that I'd like to try at some point in my life. So that was a really impactful book. Anything from Joe Dispenza, I love obviously all of his books. 5 books. The books. I really enjoy Thomas More, Dark Nights of the Soul. It's a pretty famous book. That one is that was a great one of just of like some people have really dark nights of the soul. I call them dark years of the soul, and I've certainly have been through years of the dark night. And really, I guess, just seeing that it is like a real thing. I think some people are like, oh, I'm going through a dark time, and some people really are going through like a dark night of the soul, and how that can really, when you can alchemize that pain and that darkness, it elevates your life. So I don't know, that's definitely not 5. Michael Singer, The Surrender Experiment. And then what's the other book he wrote?
Untethered
What's the other
Soul.
book? Untethered Soul. Yes, but yeah, both of those were on my list this year. Those are just also very, very good books.
Awesome. I have a friend who's connected to Michael Singer, and he wrote a book. He wrote a book kind of stemming off one of his philosophies. He calls it the 200% life. It's that it's not just 50-50, but it's the life is 100% inner and 100% outer, and that he loves the idea of starting the business because he thinks a business is a conduit for spiritual growth, and that's something that he learned from Michael Singer. And I've also read The Untethered Soul twice, and I've owned Surrender Experiment for like about 4 years now. I haven't read it. I just think I'm just not ready for it yet. It hasn't called out to me because usually I'm very aware of the energetic exchange between me and certain books. Like there's many books that I own that I haven't read yet, but I know in the future when the time is right, I'm gonna need it at that exact moment to either learn something or see a new perspective. So it's like that's why I collect the books for the future. I don't know when it's going to, but I like having the information ready and available whenever I need it. And so, yeah, those are some really good suggestions. I never heard of Think Like a Horse. That's a really interesting, fun one that I'd like to check out. And Dark Nights of the Soul, something I'm not too familiar with. I've heard that term a lot. I watched probably like a few YouTube videos explaining it. Um, but that is also something that's interesting to me. And Joe Dispenza, he's been making huge quantum leaps and waves through raising the collective consciousness. It's like you see him wearing a greatness shirt. That's Lewis House's brand. It's like every podcast Joe Dispenza goes on, he is the number one interview or number one episode or view count on like YouTube. So it's like this guy really attracts manifest of Um, a lot of wonderful and amazing information. So yeah, thank you for those was that those suggestions. Is there actually no? Let's take a even further journey backwards real quick. What has got you into this journey, into these roles, into these identities that you've accumulated to where you are now? Because it's like I like the idea of what Tony Robbins says. People change either through some type of spectrum of inspiration to desperation. For me, it was complete desperation because I was clueless. From dropping out of college to it's like, okay, I need to get my life together, figure out what's the meaning of life. I came from the desperation side. Were you always into spirituality, personal development, or was there like a catalyst or a moment where it's like, okay, I need to go into this to better my life, be happy? Where has your journey to this to today? How's it been?
I will say I knew from a very young age that I was a light, and I grew up in a pretty abusive environment, and I knew there was like a divine calling on my life at a very young age. And really, I use the word channel because that's what's coming to me. Like I really have like channeled that to this present time. I will say there were some very dark moments throughout, I'm 45, so I've, lived a little bit of life and had some experiences, and there have been very dark times. And I think because I knew that I had this divine calling on my life, that's why I've never partied. I've really have never drank. I've never smoked. I've never done drugs. It's never been appealing to me. And so, like, while all those, the typical external things that kind of, like, oh, I hit rock bottom, like I was an alcoholic or whatever, those are typical stories. I think some of my journey throughout the years, some of that had to do with, really abusive relationships, patterns that I hadn't worked through because of my childhood. I was continuing to attract abusive partners. And so that has spurred on my continual spiritual evolution journey. There's not really any specific moment in time. I just think it just is it's a continuation of what my soul came here to like reincarnate, and continuing to evolve and grow from that experience. The last couple of years have been extremely, definitely dark years of the soul. I mean, talk about, identity of just, losing everything. And for me, that was kind of like my rock bottom of like, oh, like a fracture this big cannot go unnoticed. What is going on with my life? How did I contribute to this situation? How, what was my role in this? And so I think maybe that has been a catalyst for really truly diving in some of this deeper work. But generally speaking, I have been in this field for as long as I can remember, and it's just continued to evolve and take its twists and turns as I continue to evolve and grow and learn and experience everything that this 3D world throws at you.
Has there been anything major or significant that you've been unlearning these past couple years or months or even this year that's been like really um huge in your spiritual growth?
Oh, that's yeah. I mean, a great question. What have I been learning? Gosh, learning so much. I think one of the big things that I have learned, a super vulnerable moment, I guess, is the need to be rescued, and how that was playing out in like different situations of like setting myself up to be rescued in order to like, oh, I'm lovable enough to be rescued. And that was a big pattern of like awareness around that, of like, oh, and kind of like thinking of all these different examples of like where this happened and where that happened, and really coming to like terms with that, which is, that's pretty scary of like, oh, that's what I was doing. Okay. And then having compassion. This is like what one of my teachers like, have compassion, gratefulness, and awareness. Because without awareness, there's no change. And now that I am aware of that pattern, I was able to, disentangle that and kind of realign it to like where I am being called to go. So that was a big pattern for me to unravel.
Yeah, awareness seems to be like the first step to change because it's like, let's say there's someone who's an alcoholic, but they're completely unaware that they're an alcoholic or the damage that it's causing their family members or to society or work. If they're just completely unaware of that, then it's like nothing will ever change. So it's like usually it takes like someone like a big reality check or a big epiphany for someone to become aware. That's what happened for me many times when life is like, oh, here you go. Now you're aware of what's been happening unconsciously or subconsciously through your thoughts, choices, actions, and habits and your character overall. So yeah, awareness really is like the first key to change.
With like awareness, with awareness comes great responsibility, because once you're aware of something, then you have a choice. And then it's like, what choice am I going to make? And that's really where the work comes in. It's like, no, I want to do what the ego wants to do. Like, like I don't want to do what the soul is calling me to do. And so, when you begin to kind of step into awareness, into, awareness, awareness brings you choices, and choices brings you responsibility. And what are you going to do with that responsibility? And I think that's where a lot of people check out, because it's not quote unquote easy, because Americans have been sold like everything has to be easy. And the spiritual path is not easy necessarily, because it really requires a very high level of integrity, of responsibility, and taking like ownership, and not the victim consciousness of choices. So it's very deep and like committed work.
What's your whole perspective on what society has been saying a lot these past couple of years, ever since the pandemic? What's your take on like the whole work-life balance paradigm?
What is my take on the whole work life balance? I'm not a fan of the word balance, because I think people misconstrue the word balance. They want their cake and eat it too. They want to have all the comforts in life, and yet they want the perfect body. They'll go eat the cake and then get surgery, like cosmetic surgery. There's fillers, there's injections. Like, we'll fix up the outside, and inside there, it's decay. It's debt, it's disease. And so I don't think from my perspective, there's no such thing as work life balance. I think when you are in your soul's vision and mission, everything becomes your work life lens. Like, there's no separation. And I think when there's separation, when we silo things of like, well, I'll work out and run 10 miles and go drink a beer because I earned it, that's separation, because you're having to justify why you're doing something, because if you have to justify a reason why you're doing something, you already know that you shouldn't be doing it. There's a judgment there. And so really coming back in like wholeness and integrity of like, everything's entwined, everything's integrated. Like, my work is my life is my, work. And I think most people want, the 9 to 5 and have that security, and they realize like there isn't security in that. And that's where they kind of become, you know, that's why people are, they want balance, but you can't have balance when you've siloed your life. And it just, you just can't. It doesn't mathematically equate to that. And so when you can kind of integrate your whole life together, then things have wholeness. And so I prefer the words wholeness and harmony versus balance, because people are trying to balance things that they're totally separate, and we can't bring harmony and balance to something that's over here. um, so I think, educating and teaching people, leading the way of like, come back into wholeness with yourself, and then you'll just naturally have that quote unquote balance.
Yeah, that's a powerful shift there, and I think I may be able to piggyback off of that. is that if you come from that wholeness um, frame of reference there, you may be able to change your paradigm, your attachment to the word work. I think this comes from Alan Watts, where he doesn't use the words like work, but uses it as play. Because if you see work as play, you get like a whole like different like energetic attachment to it. It's like, oh, it could be fun, it could be less serious and stuff like that. That could be potentially powerful for someone. Something that you mentioned a little bit ago, you actually mentioned twice throughout this conversation, is like you don't party, you don't drink, you don't do drugs. It's like, are you an American? But there may be that one person who's listening or watching this that's like, okay, well, what do you do for fun? What are some of those things that you find fun and bring out the kid out of you, that bring you joy? So, what are some of those things?
Yeah, I love that question. Well, I think we need to, as a society, we need to redefine the word fun. It's funny on threads, I see so many similar questions of like, you don't drink and you don't smoke and you don't party and like, what do you do for fun? And again, it's a very, it's a matrix thing of society has been programmed to think that, drinking cancer, which is what, alcohol is, just drinking straight up poison, glyphosate. I mean, it's just so toxic for the body that that's somehow fun. And then they're miserable. They wake up with a freaking hangover, and they get into bad situations. And so people have mislabeled fun. For me, fun is, I'm not doing this currently, but when I was training full time in the mountains out in Colorado, like I would get up at 2 a.m. and go climb a 14,000-foot mountain, fast, and like that to me was fun. I was out living my life to the fullest, experiencing nature, seeing the stars in the sky with no light pollution, and that to me was like that was happiness. It was internal core of just like this, like really connecting again with like the divine. That to me was fun, of like doing something challenging, hard, difficult, accomplishing it, and taking a nap. That to me is fun. So I think for me, I have just I try not to use the word just, but for me, I've really intentionally am lighting the path for other people to redefine the word fun. Fun for me is I do jigsaw puzzles. I just did finish like a 2,000 piece one a couple of months ago. I'm on another one now. I always have a jigsaw puzzle out. That to me is fun. Fun is helping other people, helping them, shift a word in their language, unravel a limiting belief they've had, connecting with people, having conversations. Fun for me is working out. It's lifting weights. It's hiking. It's climbing. It's running. Like fun is cooking nutritious meals. Fun is entertaining, having guests over. Fun is having deep spiritual conversations and deeply connecting with another human. That to me is fun. Fun is getting a massage. Like, no, I don't drink alcohol. I invest my money into body care. Like I would much rather get a massage than go to the bar. um and fun for me is like going to farmers markets and buying nutritious food. It's growing my own food. It's being in nature. And that to me is fun. I think what people normally call, what normal label as fun, it sounds awful. Like going to, like, my bedtime is like 8 p.m. Like I like sleep. That to me is fun. It just, to me, that sounds miserable to like sit at a bar and just like watch TV and like just be a blob. Like there's no consciousness in that. It's just, that to me sounds miserable. So I am very, very happy, very grateful that I've been able to kind of live this way, by design, on purpose, by choice. Of I am totally content to, go to bed at 8 p.m. on Friday night, call a friend, do a puzzle, um, make a difference in the world. That to me is fun, of like, you know, entrepreneurship, like thinking of businesses and starting new businesses and working, diligently on them. That to me is just a lot of fun. I love business. I love helping other people with businesses, and um, yeah, just living such a rich, full life from like what I do.
I love that. That's very beautiful. Before I ask my last question, where can people go who is listening and watching this to go follow you, get in contact with you, and support you? Where would you like for everyone to go to?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram at Hope Rose Speaks. Also on threads at Hope Rose Speaks. And then my website is hoperosespeaks.com. I also say this, I mentioned this at the beginning of the interview, or our conversation, more than an interview, our conversation, our dialogue, our connection is a couple weeks ago. Like I was very specifically just downloaded so clearly to me to do an online summit called A Transformed Life, which is the title of my podcast. And so November 11th through 15th, I am hosting Transformed Life online summit. It's five evenings in a row. We have 11 speakers right now. Might be a few more coming on. And so it's free. People can go to a transformedlife.com, transformedlifesummit.com, and sign up, register for that. But I'm super excited about that. That's fun for me. That brings me, great joy. And so if people are like, yeah, looking for, any healing, whether it's, personally, or if you want to grow your business or wherever you are in life, there's so many amazing speakers that cover from, business to energetics to spirituality to just a lot of different topics. It's going to be an amazing event. So I would love to see everybody there.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Of course, the links to all of those will be in the show notes and descriptions below. And this last question, this was never planned when I rebranded my podcast because this podcast is a rebrand, and it's been something that's came up just naturally, and it's been my favorite question to ask people. And it is, what is that one thing deep down in your intuition? What are you channeling, or that deep feeling in your heart that you feel the need to express to all of humanity? Whether it's a quote, whether it's a message, whether it's a life principle, what is that thing that's really resonant, that's vibrating within you that you want to share to the world?
I got the perfect answer. Everyone has a masterpiece inside them. And unfortunately, nobody's able to view that masterpiece that only they can paint because it's covered up by childhood trauma, wounds they haven't healed, shame, fear, guilt. Um, they've offloaded responsibility. They've, exchanged their soul for something else. It's buried in layers of generations of trauma and whatever is going on in their life. My role is to uncover that on a global scale so that way everyone can enjoy that masterpiece that only they can paint, and the world is living, not dying, the world is living to see that masterpiece that only they can display for the world. And when I say that masterpiece, it's love and joy and healing and gratefulness and gratitude. Like that's what the world sees. And right now, the world is seeing the hurt, wounded version of that. And the world wants to see the masterpiece come out inside. And so my role is on a global scale, is to ungunk, unclear that masterpiece off so everyone can view it and they can be expressed fully with love and light.
Wow, that's I encourage everyone to, go back a minute or two and re-listen to that over again because that was very powerful. Something that you mentioned actually right there that's woke me up a little bit is that is a pretty common saying between the living and dying. It's like I'm dying to see this person in concert, or I'm dying to go to vacation in a couple of weeks. It's like, no, why would you say that way? That was a very powerful paradigm shift that I'm aware of now, that I have the conscious ability to change that. So thank you for that, and thank you for that whole entire message.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah, and I trust that uh, this podcast, this conversation will reach the right people with the right messages at the right time. And so, thank you, Hope, for this wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot, and I trust that many, 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 many others have as well. And so that I am grateful for you, and I am thankful for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm grateful to be on here, and thank you for allowing me to share some words and wisdom with with your listeners.